A Colorado jury convicted the two paramedics connected to the 2019 death of Elijah McClain. Now, Peter Cichuniec and Jeremy Cooper, two former members of the Aurora Fire Department, were called to the scene on August 24, 2019 to help McClain after he was stopped by the police. Cooper injected McClain with large amounts of ketamine, resulting in an overdose. Now, both paramedics have now been terminated. Cichuniec and Cooper are two of the 5 authorities charged in the homicide of McClain. Randy Roe-dema was found guilty of criminally negligent homicide and third-degree assault, and he will be sentenced in January. Jason Rosenblatt and Nathan Woodyard were acquitted of all of the charges. Now, when we think about all of the facts here to my panel, we were talking about this young man. There was a call. A local businessman thought that this young man in a ski mask looked very suspicious. We are talking corroded chokehold. His ski mask was never taken off. He vomited in his ski mask. No one assessed his vital signs when they showed up or asked how much he weighed. All of the math was wrong with the ketamine, and this is why they were in the situation that they were in. I want to go to you first, Scott. What do you think about the outcome of this? In fact, there was a higher charge that they were not found guilty of, reckless manslaughter. How do you feel about this decision?
You know, this is a tough case for both sides because the criminal intent, right? And whether it's specific intent or general intent, you've got to be able to prove criminality and that the mindset of the defendants was either criminal negligence or disregard for what would normally be the conduct of these individuals that did not that reached beyond negligence, but reached the level of criminal negligence or indifference, depraved indifference, I think the statute says here. And the jury cut the baby in half, didn't think it was manslaughter, but certainly with this young man, if you want to inject them with this medicine and to either reduce the violence or reduce whatever was going on as a way of treating him, you've got to have some medical statistics or some vitals from this individual, or you can't do it. Now, the paramedics would argue that we didn't have time. We were making split-second decisions, and we needed to do something. I got it. But the simple fact that he's not responding doesn't mean you pump more into him. There's got to be some medical standards in your training. If you violated those standards, then as a result, you're not only going to face civil lawsuits, but in this particular case, because of the depraved indifference of your actions, then you certainly could face criminal charges. And in this case, it did, because there was no context, there was no information, they didn't even ask these questions before they started working on this young man, and it proved fatal to his life. But
and Joe, I think that's what is key here.
This young man would be alive.
Yes, and what's key here, Joe, is that they were way off in terms of their assessment. They thought that he weighed 200 pounds when he weighed 140 pounds. So then we do get into a question of training. Their defense would say and argue in court that, listen, this is a really state and county level. This has nothing to do with any type of federal crimes, and that they rose to the occasion in terms of their training as we talked about, both sides. Really, it was really difficult to make this decision. What are your thoughts about the outcome of this?
A lot. They did a lot of things wrong. Really, they get to the scene. It takes them 7 minutes to make contact with Elijah McClain. They testified inconsistently than some of the things that showed up on tape. They said that he was saying gibberish, but there are specific sentences that he's saying, where he is cognizant about what's going on, but he feels threatened. The next thing that I would say, not to try to be funny, but this brother weighed $105. I mean, soaking wet. There's no way you look at this guy and say he's 200 pounds. There's no way. And then ketamine is very, very is potentially lethal if you don't have your weights right. I mean, they basically gave him 50% more ketamine than they should have, and then they said that they did it because of excited delirium, which, depending on who you ask, isn't a thing at all.
Right.
What it probably was is him lacking oxygen. Okay. And in any event, more to the point for everything, they say that they kept the police kept them from doing their jobs, but you don't hear them talking about that on tape. You don't hear them talking about that on the body cam. So that's not necessarily believable. And then to the point of what the police did or didn't do, they were in a situation where none of them was under threat. None of them. Given this size, the number of them versus the number of him, they didn't have anything to worry about with this kid. They didn't have to do it the way that they did it. The question becomes whether and to what extent you separate what the police did or didn't do. And by the way, they pretty much got off. One of them's back at work versus what the paramedics did or didn't do. But there are a lot of inconsistencies with what the paramedics said and what actually happened, saying that he was, a certain way on the gurney when he wasn't, saying that he was saying gibberish when he spoke very, very clearly. So there were some inconsistencies there, but they did, to the point made, decide to split the baby. And so there's criminally negligent homicide, not a specific intent for murder wasn't brought, but a general intent for manslaughter. They decided not to do either. But if you ask the mother, you ask this brother's mother, she'll say it wasn't justice. She'll say that it wasn't enough because at the end of the day, a couple of the cops are still running the street and they weren't prosecuted to the highest extent, or at least in terms of the success rate related to the manslaughter conviction, which would be difficult. Admittedly, it's very, very difficult to do, but she's not going to be satisfied with that. And so it's just unfortunate all the way around, because at the end of the day, it's not something that had to happen at all. They're precise and deliberate and careful when it comes to convicting these folks, but they weren't precise and deliberate when it came to dealing with this brother when they saw him.
Yes, and no humanity at all, Joe. Didn't even take the ski cap off, seeing that he was down there and seeing that he was, convulsing or something, where he could have been spitting up, vomiting, which he was, and that made things worse.
That's right. No doubt about it.
Or to even see how young he was, to assess his age.
That's right. To look at his face. You could see.
Assessing his age.
Yes. Torrin, I wanted to go to you. There's quite a legacy left here for this young man who liked to play music to animals, was a massage therapist, just nice by all accounts, minding his own business. What type of legacy does this leave? Because we look at the legacy and why it was kept alive. It really was his mother who was not letting this go as certainly as she should have.
Well, I think there's two legacies here. One of them is a new legacy and one of them is a very old one. The first one is the fact that his mother was able to let the world know that this was a very beautiful, sensitive, talented young man whose life was taken from him. And that's something that I have to commend her for letting us see the humanity in him. The second legacy is the fact that this society often does not see the humanity in young black boys. The other two guests talked about the fact that this young man was 140 pounds and they said that he was 200. We have to understand that we live in a society where, especially when you're dealing with like law enforcement and the medical field, where your skin is your threat. It doesn't matter what size you are. It doesn't matter what your gifts are. This society sees a young black man as a threat. In their mind, they saw this young, convulsing, 140-pound young man as somebody who's like the size of Suge Knight and Mr. from Color Purple. That's what they saw in their mind, and that's how they reacted to it. And it just surprises me that somebody could see somebody who was in physical trauma, and you, although you're not a doctor, your job is to alleviate the suffering of somebody going through some sort of issue. But we've already seen the data that says a lot of times people in the medical field believe that black people are either faking it when they say they're going through physical pain, or they feel like we can take more pain than the average human being, so they give you more drugs, so they give you less treatment. This is something that's happening. This is something that we see with with female mortality rates with black women. We see this with people, men who are in serious pain or maybe in cancer or maybe dealing with serious illnesses, who are given less meds because they feel like we're trying to get high of what we're trying to use. This is what happens when you don't see the humanity in a young man. This is what happens when you don't see the humanity in certain parts of your population. And I think this speaks to a larger issue in the medical field that really needs to be addressed. There's been some preliminary conversation about that, but we also have to talk about how many people have been injured and maimed and possibly killed in a medical field by people who don't have any empathy and don't have any understanding of us as human beings. That has to be addressed.
A new year for a new you. Curl Prep Natural Hair Solutions at curlprep.com is an amazing organic line for curls, locks, braids, twists, and even those wigs and extensions. Women, men, and children are loving this line. Look at this video and you be the judge. People line up to see this product in action at hair shows, and when they take a seat and try it, they don't believe it's their hair. Buy the products at curlprep.com. It works on all hair types. Use code Roland, that's R-O-L-A-N-D, lowercase letters, to get a 15% discount. Parents, remove the ouch. You will love this system because you can comb the product through your child's hair with your fingers. Seasoned saints are loving the product. It's all at curlprep.com. Use code Roland, lowercase letters, to get a 15% discount. You won't believe it's your hair.